Hi everybody, it's Matt here, your local friendly neighbourhood vestibular migraine sufferer. So, as I said in my last video, my mum's been really poorly in the last couple of months, so that's taken up a lot of my time. Also balancing that with maintaining a job and earning a crust. So I haven't been able to do as many videos as I'd liked. So, given there's been that little bit of a gap, I thought now might be a really good time to do a little bit of an update for the long-term subscribers as to where I am, and then perhaps also a bit of a summary about what happened to me and what worked for me in terms of treatment for those people who recently subscribed and who perhaps have not had a chance to work through my back catalogue as yet. So starting with what happened to me. So I have suffered from two periods of chronic vestibular migraine. So the first occurrence was in 2012, but it was never actually diagnosed at that time. I think they put it down to some kind of weird virus, but I seem to remember getting off the bus when I was going to work and just suddenly feeling just incredibly weird, like I never felt before. And I think I sat down like after just getting off the bus and thinking, am I having a stroke or something? You know, all these funny thoughts go through your head. And then I just got quite poorly quite quickly, and I do remember becoming quite sensitive to the lights in the office where I worked, and the motion as well. I remember like traffic feeling a bit of a problem for me when I was like walking towards roads. So with me getting those weird symptoms, then that anxiety started to flare up. As we know, anxiety is a symptom that always seems to come with vestibular migraine. One of my bugbears is people think what we're experiencing is just anxiety. It's not. Anxiety is just one component of the wider illness of vestibular disorder, vestibular migraine. So I think I spiraled down further and thought I'd got a brain tumour, which apparently is quite common for people who have vestibular issues or even labyrinthitis. They think, oh, I've got all these weird symptoms that are changing my sight and my balance, I must have got a tumour that's doing this. It's logical when you think about it. So I thought, anyway, so I got treatment, I had a brain scan, and it showed I did have a brain, which was a shock, but it showed nothing wrong with my brain or the vestibular nerves. So they put it down to some kind of weird virus, and then I was given a very small dose of amitriptyline, which I know some people watching this video will be taking, and then I'd say I think kind of my symptoms lasted about a month, and then kind of like I just seem to remember them not really being there as much and settling down. So I was hunky-dory, and then for the next, whatever it was, 6 or 7 years, I never heard a peep from the whole vestibular migraine or disorder. Then in 2019, I was in a good place in my life. I was enjoying a fairly new job I was doing. I was making a success of my home and social life. So all was good really in the world. And then suddenly I was at a football match, and everything changed within a few seconds. So I remember looking at the pitch, at the players on the pitch, and then suddenly realised I couldn't quite focus on them. Like it was like the motion they were giving off by moving was weird, and I couldn't lock my sight onto them. And then within seconds, I suddenly started to get really difficulty in breathing. It became very laboured, and I felt like I had tremendous pressure or weight on my chest, and then everything started to go a bit white and like I was going to faint. Anyway, so I got looked at, and there was nothing, you know, they checked my vitals basically, and they weren't showing anything untoward. But then unfortunately after that, some symptoms started to creep in, so I started to get photophobia again. I noticed the office lights were becoming a problem. I was getting derealization or depersonalization, as folks in the United States call it, and then the anxiety started to creep in, and that kind of fixated upon me having some kind of weird condition that I couldn't get rid of, and I'm going to be like this forever, and I can't work, and I can't do this and that, X, Y, Z. And my condition just plummeted, and I just then got really poorly. So this was the second occurrence, but this was kind of I don't know what I would call it, really, the pinnacle occurrence, because this is the one where I finally found out what was wrong with me, what was causing it, and I found a way out. I found proper treatment and mitigations which last for me until this day, and which I generally think will prevent me getting that poorly ever again from vestibular stuff anyway. It won't prevent me from getting cancer, for example. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. So the second period, which was 2019, I was ill for about 3 months. My symptoms were non-stop. So my first ever video I did on vestibular stuff was called 24/7, because I had symptoms 24 hours a day for 7 days a week with no break in them. It was just constantly like that, with all these symptoms: photophobia, derealization, anxiety, laboured breathing, all just there constantly. So I'm one of these people basically who's had 2 chronic episodes of vestibular migraine with a big gap, where I do know there are sufferers who will be constantly prone to sort of vestibular migraine attacks or vestibular symptoms off and on, a bit more like a regular migraine. I think, you know, we're all different, aren't we? And I think it probably also, men and women differ on this one. I know that's not fashionable to say that men and women are different, but let's whisper it, we know they are. And unfortunately, one of the things that women have that men don't is they have different hormones at work. And I think from my research and talking to fellow women sufferers, women do seem to get this condition worse. And I do think that that sort of little extra ingredient for women is hormones, unfortunately. There was a reason why this illness was called floating women's disease back in the day. So that's where I am, and that's why I ended up doing videos. So probably the most common 2 questions I get asked are, can you get better, and then what meds do I take? So I'm going to cover those off in my next little segment here. So, but I'm going to put a little spin on it. So I'm going to turn it around and say, in my opinion, if I was just to have all my time again and I just did 2 things, these 2 things I'm going to talk you through what I would do again to make sure I got better again, or if it happens to be in the future. So the first thing, and super important thing, is that you need to get a diagnosis. So what tends to happen is your regular doctors or GPs or locums, whatever you call them around the world, many of them have never heard of vestibular migraine and no idea what it is. So they'll put the symptoms down to a virus, as in my case, or what happened to me in the second chronic phase was people start to say, oh, it's anxiety, which is just boils my blood, because if everybody who ever experienced anxiety in their life means they would get vestibular migraine, then everybody would get vestibular migraine, but everybody doesn't. So it can't be that anxiety is the sole cause of vestibular migraine, otherwise everybody would have it. It boils my piss, to use more of a coarse phrase, when it's lumbered as anxiety, but a lot of GPs will do that. So what can happen is that you can waste an awful lot of time kind of being fobbed off by your GPs, your regular GPs, your doctors, your locums, which then delays you getting on that road to recovery and makes the situation worse, and you feel trapped in like a maelstrom, a whirlpool of shit that you can't escape from. So the first major thing you need to do to get to that diagnosis is, as soon as you possibly can, you get a referral from the doctor, GP, locum to more specialist level. So if you're in a country like the UK where it can take a long time to get those referrals, pay for it. It's the best money you'll ever spend. There's no better way to spend your money than on improving your health or returning your health back to normal, getting you out of that maelstrom that you're in with vestibular disorder. So pay for private. That then takes you to the specialist level, and then you want to be seeing either a neurologist, an ENT, so that's an ear, nose and throat specialist, like the lady I saw, which was a Mrs. Susan Douglas. So if you're in the South Yorkshire region, or if you fancy a trip there to sort your vestibular problems, book in with Mrs. Susan Douglas, because on the whole they have more experience with vestibular disorder, vestibular conditions. I'm not saying they all do, there are some that will fob you off and maybe don't know what they're doing, but there are more and more of them occurring now that do, and some of them actually will even specialise in it. So they are you want to get to see them as quickly as possible, because they can then start you on the right treatments that a GP just doesn't really know about. So then my second major tip for me, and those of you who've seen some of my other videos, you know that I am a big kind of supporter and well in favour of medication to treat vestibular migraine or disorder. Not saying that there's other ways you can't, there are other ways you can get treated, I'm sure there are, but for me what worked is the right medications. I've seen that work in other people, and I can only go on my own experience, which is what I'm passing on my experience. And for me, it was getting that right combination of medications And I would always advise, if you're a bit nervous about medications, or if you're a bit, you know, they don't agree with you that well, try and stick at it. Because I had side effects for a while when I was getting used to my meds, but I stuck at it because I kind of believed in it. And that was based on my brother, who'd been really poorly a few years before with something else, but meds really sorted him out, so I believed in them. So the two meds that work for me, they have been taken in combination. So there's sertraline, which I think is called Zoloft in the States, and then there's propranolol, which I don't know what they're called in the States. They're commonly called beta blockers as well. They're in like the family of beta blockers. So what the sertraline did is that tackled predominantly my anxiety symptoms. So once I'd got on top of that via the sertraline, it meant that some of the fuel that was adding to my vestibular physical problems was doused down. The hose went on that fuel. So then the physical symptoms were losing the, you know, the embers, well, the fuel that they needed to really keep going, and that was prolonging the illness. So they really helped with that. Also, I have read research and studies that also suggest that sertraline also tackles some of those physical symptoms like derealization, photophobia, etc. Then in tandem with that, I was taking propranolol, as I said. So that is a traditional kind of migraine drug. It's used to treat regular migraine, and of course that obviously does tackle some of those physical symptoms for migraine, but it does also have a soothing effect on the old anxiety. It can slow your heart rate. One of the things I was having with vestibular disorder was it was affecting my blood pressure. So the breathing, the blood pressure, they're probably the two weirdest symptoms I had. And also one as well about speech, so where I felt like my speech was getting affected. So those three are the weirdest symptoms I had. This one certainly does help with the whole blood pressure issue. Never had a blood pressure issue in my life, but when I was going through this chronic spell of vestibular illness, I was having blood pressure issues. So the combination of those two put together, it's like that yin and yang combo, isn't it? It's like man, woman. It's like Batman and Robin, you know, that dynamic duo together. That's what worked for me. So I would always advise and encourage sufferers out there to try and find that combo of meds that works for them. So I started off with 50 mg of sertraline, and that's like a starter dose. But then once I raised it to 100 after about 4 weeks, I started to almost straight away notice a difference with my anxiety. And then that kind of gave me a bit of courage then to try and get back to some of my life, while still being ill with physical symptoms. Say, well, I'm going to have a go at going back to work, which is so crucial. And as I said, that one then has helped with the physical symptoms and also a little bit of the anxiety. So I was taking quite a high dose of this. I think I was taking 80 mg in the morning and 80 mg at night at first. That made me feel like an old man because it made me feel very sluggish. But the kind of settled dose I'm on now is 40 mg in the morning and 40 mg at night. Work well for me. So finding the right meds. Now, there are other things that I think are helpful too, that kind of might be sort of, what's the word, the opposites of meds. So they might be natural herbs, things like that, vitamins. I'll come on to those in a sec. I'm not poo-pooing those, and I do think they can play a good role, but I just don't think anything else beats meds. Science works. Then the other big thing to me, if I was advising myself 3 years ago, if I'd gone back in time to say, hey Matt, do these two things and you'll get well, would be to get yourself some FL41 glasses. So these glasses, they look pink, so you look cool like John Lennon or Robert Downey Jr. But what they do is they, out of the light wavelength, they strip out the blue and the green wavelengths. And the blue and the green wavelengths are most upsetting to people who are prone to migraine. So those are the most harsh light wavelengths, I think, probably a good way of describing it. So getting these meant that I could start doing some normal things again, like I could look at my phone without feeling crap. I could look at the computer without feeling weird or getting photophobia or just feeling like it's just weird to look at. And that then, given computers and phones are a big part of modern life, you can start to get yourself back into life a bit with these, because they do really help. They're also really handy if you're going into places like supermarkets or the shopping mall in the States, where there's all those lights and people moving around. They're taking out those, as I said, those blue and green wavelengths in the light. And I've always argued that if you can take down some of the visual stimulation, so the photophobia and the motion sensitivity, then the derealization eases back. Because what I think derealization is the brain getting overloaded by too much light and too much motion from whatever's going on in your body to create those symptoms, and then it just trips out because it's trying to give you a break. So these things not only mean you can start looking at computers, but they do really help with derealization. So in the UK, there's a company called UKI Sportswear, a chap called Mike Dixon, smashing bloke. He knows his stuff. I think he's working with Birmingham University, or certainly got links to them, who've done this big project to design these lenses. So he can, for example, if you've got a trendy pair of glasses that have got an old prescription in, like these were, so these were out of date for me, but the frames are still alright, so I sent him these and he put FL41 lenses, and he got rid of my old prescription, put these lenses in. To this day, I still use these, for example, to watch TV in the evenings. If I've been, I don't know, in the office all day or wherever at the pub, I will always put these on when I come home. I take my contact lenses out and put these on, because they will give my eyes a break from those horrible wavelengths that I've mentioned, and that I think is a crucial mitigation to help keeping me well. It gives my eyes a break so they don't get overloaded, so I don't get the brain start overloading and getting derealization. So I think them plus the meds, and then continuing with these things once you've got better, these two things are the most crucial mitigations that I think you can do. And pretty much for the med side, the only really way you can get to that is by seeing a specialist rather than a GP. But with these, as I said, in the UK, you just go to UK Sportswear, I think it's called, just UKI Sportswear, sorry I'm tired. Or if in the States, Axon Optics, and I know Axon export to everywhere around the world, so wherever you are you can get stuff from Axon, and I don't think you'll go too far on. So as I mentioned though, those are the two things that if I could only take two things, that those would be them. But there are other things out there that are, I think, really beneficial, and I've learned a lot about these things as I've interacted with people and you know, the fellow vestibular community. So the right vitamins I think are a good thing to do. So I currently take vitamin D and turmeric. So as fans of my other videos, that's a bit arrogant, isn't it? As watchers or viewers of my other videos know, I think what we're experiencing here is a result of inflammation in our body. So if you can eat food or take some vitamins that bring down inflammation, in which turmeric is a natural anti-inflammatory, that is only going to bode well. So I take turmeric. Vitamin D, as I said, particularly living in the north of England, which you can hear it's raining now through my window. We don't see that much sun, so vitamin D is something that we perhaps need to replace through vitamins. But I have taken other vitamins as well at various times, some of the B12 for example. I think I took magnesium for a while to try and battle with the fatigue. So I think they're a really good idea. I have altered my diet, so putting in foods in there that are anti-inflammatory, removing foods that perhaps can inflame your body a bit. In the week I try and eat really well. I prepare all my own food now. I don't get anything that I don't know what's in it. Basically, I'm totally in control of that. We all have a bit of a blowout on a Friday, you know, where you have a few beers and you might have a curry out. It's fine, don't worry about that. Don't get overly bogged down. You can't be good every day, and just once every week is not going to, in my opinion, suddenly put you in vestibular hell. As long as you eat healthily the rest of the week, fine by me. And there are other forms of mitigations as well, as I said, that people have, or more natural remedies. Some people, fans of meditation. I'm not a massive fan of that. I'm just not built that way, but other people are, so I'm not poo-pooing them. So there are other mitigations that you can take forward, but as I said, I've just tried to focus here on the two. If I could go back in time to myself when I was really poorly, I'd be telling them about FL41s, and I'd be saying get the right meds, and do that by going to a specialist. So that's really bringing sort of things to a close, really. I think one final tip as well that I would really recommend for anybody who's, particularly if you're newly suffering and you're still not quite sure what's wrong, or you've just figured out what's wrong or been told what's wrong and you're not sure whether you're going to get better. One of the worst things I think you can do is to become a member, for example, of the Vestibular Facebook page for any length of time. I think it has its uses, particularly when you're first trying to figure out what's going on, and it has useful hints and tips for remedies and that kind of thing. But particularly with that Facebook one, which I think is run by those two sulky face women, is what you'll find is there's people on there who are just all poorly, and there's very, very rarely any examples from people who have got better. Now, the reason why that happens is because when people get better, most people will just delete that page. They'll get rid of it. They'll not be a member anymore. They'll leave, and you'll never hear from them again. So they never tell their story about how they've got well. So you're left basically with an imbalance where you've just got poorly people here, and you've got really no better people on that forum or any other forum. So it creates a bit of a false impression as to that you're forever stuck. So try not to dwell on those pages too much. Of course, there are people though who have been ill for a long time. I've spoken to people who have with vestibular stuff. Sometimes we as human beings are just a bit unlucky. I think in some cases there's probably other things going on, other kind of ailments that are prolonging the condition. As I said before as well, I think women can be quite unlucky with vestibular disorder because of hormones. So there are those cases out there where people are struggling for a long time, but on the whole, most of the people that get in touch with me at some point during the period I'm interacting with them, they will start improving. And then there are people out there, like I say, like myself, I know many others who've got 100% better, and you can and will get better. It's just, if you, as I said, you need to get that diagnosis and then get the right treatment, which for me, if I prioritise one of them, it would be getting the right form of medication. So that's about it really. So to bring things nicely up to date, I think it's 3 years-ish since my vestibular episode. I would say I'm 100% better. I get occasional pangs or flashes of symptoms. So for example, I think it was only the day I felt a bit of the funny breathing suddenly creep on. It doesn't last very long. I also, if I don't sleep well consecutive nights, for example, I can feel a little bit of derealisation, and sometimes it just can happen a bit if I've stared at a computer screen for a long time without my old friend the FL41s on for a few seconds. I can just feel it, and I'll just stop and pull away from the screen or shut my eyes for a bit. But I generally, as I said at the start of the video, I think that there's probably has been occasions where a more aggressive or chronic phase of vestibular migraine could have got me again, particularly during the last 3 months with my mum being poorly. But the mitigations, so having the surfboard to ride the waves means that, and the mitigations, so the meds and the FL41s, the surfboard, means that I have been able to hold off any other chronic occurrences. Now, it might be that I do fall into one again. Who knows? I haven't got a crystal ball, but I can only go on my experience, and I'm only passing on my experience to you guys. And my experience is 3 years down the line, I haven't succumbed to a major vestibular illness since 2019, and I honestly generally believe the mitigations I am doing are keeping that at bay. I now have the surfboard, so when the waves do come, and obviously I've had a bit of a tricky period lately, I've got the surfboard to negotiate those waves. So I generally believe that, and I believe everybody can get to that position. And I know it's hard, I know it's not a smooth road, it's not a straight road, it's a road with twists and turns and, you know, boulders in the road and obstacles, whatever you want to an analogy you want to use. But I firmly believe that everybody can get to that point, and the most crucial thing is getting the diagnosis. And for me, the second most crucial thing is getting that right combination of meds. So I hope you find that useful. If you're a newcomer, a new subscriber, a bit of a background as to where I am, and I hope my old friends and subscribers appreciate the update. And I'd always encourage everybody else to make some videos, you know, grow this community, pass the message on that this is not a death sentence, or this is not, you know, you're not going to be ill indefinitely. Bodies change. I always say to people, bodies change. your body might have changed slightly, so you've got your vestibular occurrence changes again. If our bodies didn't change, then nobody would ever grow up, would they? We'd all be Peter Pans and no one would grow old, which maybe is a good thing, but so you won't stay like this forever. And that's why I always coin and end my videos with the quote from a favourite band of mine. The quote is, as you were, you'll be again. So I genuinely believe that everybody with this illness can get back to what they were if they can find those right mitigations. So thank you for listening this long. If you have done, it's a 25-minute video. Apologies for that. But I think particularly people who are new to this and are really suffering, I think long videos which give you tips and hints, I think, you know, they're really appreciated. For me, it was really appreciated when I first ever started looking at a few videos. I think Amy Shock was have a look for her. She was really helpful to me at that early point. So I think you'll probably bother that the video has been particularly long. But if you stuck this long, thank you so much for doing so. If you didn't like what you heard, it's fine. But thank you for listening anyway. And just left for me to say, as you were, you'll be again. See you later, guys.